Welcome to Club E. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I am your architect of business growth and will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today, we are talking about bootstrapping sales is different, part 2. I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, Romaine Berg, a digital marketing agency, Schwegman, Lumberg, Woosner, an intellectual property law firm, and VoyagerU, a community to build your independent work life. To participate in the comments section today, you must be in YouTube. And if you are there, please submit your questions. We will do our best to weave it into the conversation. And also, while you're there, please hit the subscribe button. And if you are so inclined, hit the like button as well. And also, these days, we are on your favorite podcast platform, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and many others. So you can catch us in all different avenues. And then also don't forget, you can visit clubby.com for past videos as well. All right, with that, I'd like to introduce today's guest, John Arms. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for those of you who caught our part 1 in this series, John spoke recently, and we are going to extend that conversation today. If you are in YouTube, you can see John's contact information there. If you are not in YouTube, it's john.arms@voyageru.com for email. All right, with that, John, tell us a little bit about yourself, your firm, and all the various different things that you are involved with.
Sure. Happy to. Thank you for having me, Rick. So a little bit about myself. I come from marketing and advertising. I began my career at the University of Minnesota, the Minnesota Daily, as a copywriter. So those are my origins, and I know that probably there's a lot of people on the call who have a similar start. I worked here and there until I started my own ad agency in 2004, ran that until 2017, and I have been independent ever since. I have 3 different businesses. I have JP Arms Marketing, where I'm a fractional chief marketing officer for clients. I've got Voyageur University, which is what we're going to talk about today. That's where we put people in business for themselves. And last but definitely not least, I have a small woodworking side hustle, and that's called the Minnesota Mantle. And it's called that because the first thing I built was a mantle. It's very original. I restore things and make things out of recycled wood. So those are my 3 businesses. The other, that's a good question, various activities. I'm also an advisor on a board of advisor for 2 companies. So one is Projection Smart. That's an awesome software where you can sort of look into the future. Most software looks back, but if you want a loan from a bank or find out, if I can hire somebody, you better be looking forward to that. So Projection Smart's really, really good with that. So I'm on that board. And then one I just recently joined is really cool, kind of a passion to my own heart. It's called Modern Carnivore. And Modern Carnivore is it's a really cool online community, not unlike Voyager, where they teach you a lot of stuff, but it comes to the outdoors from a foodie and conservation lens, which is a really good way to enjoy the great outdoors. So they're really working hard on bringing non-traditional populations into the outdoors. Women, children, people at risk, people of color, people who aren't traditionally in that normal outdoor set. Say, hey, come on in. These resources belong to everybody. Let's get everybody in. And I tell you, there's no better way than starting with food to get people to enjoy things. So those are a couple boards I'm on. So that's me in a nutshell.
So I was going to ask a couple of other things. The Projection Smart, maybe tell us a little bit more about that. They are a Club E resource, so you can learn more about them on the clubby.com website. But tell us a little bit more about your involvement there.
Yeah, so my job is where I'm that person in the CMO seat that they just don't have, and I'm advising in that role. So while it's a great idea, Roger's got a great vision, the product is great. Sales and marketing it's just not part of the organization to have. So I've been stepping in there and helping them with that. And sometimes I think most of what I do is keeping people from stepping in bear traps, just not doing the wrong thing or avoiding random acts and getting the marketing and sales in the right direction. So that's been my role. I also play a little bit of a role just as a general business advisor. That's part of being on any board, but it's great to use this gray hair to some benefit. That's not for me, where I can go, ooh, careful, don't do that, whatever that thing is. So that's a really fun role, and it's a really cool product. That's what's kind of neat is people can look forward and say, "Gosh, can I afford to hire somebody?" You make this sort of weird decision, like, I don't know, let's just do it. And that whole let's just do it and find out later is really painful for businesses. And Projection Smart does a good job of taking that out of the equation. Like, oh no, let's do it, but let's be smart about it. Let's look at our projections.
So,
So that's that.
A little bit more on Minnesota Mantle, because I know that you believe in kind of the side hustles as being part of a
Yeah.
person's multi-revenue stream, independent lifestyle.
hmm
Talk a little bit about how you evolved a hobby into a side hustle.
Sure, sure. Well, like a lot of hobbies, you like doing something and enjoy it. You do it for free for so many people for so long. You decide, well, I might as well make a couple of bucks. And I was doing, furniture restorations, building tables. This table I'm at right now, I built, restoring all sorts of stuff, making a lot of duck calls, and I'm just giving, like, just happy to do it because it was soothing to me to do woodworking. Finally, people were like, I'm going to pay you. I need to give you money. Stop giving it away. So that mixed with when you get into any hobby, you find out, well, I could have some cooler tools. I could have a new table saw. I could sure use a new jigsaw. It'd be nice to have a new lathe. So then you start thinking about financing your side hustle, which is just the next step in, well, let's make some profit on it. So that's how that became, it's not a big part, but it's a relatively reasonable part of my portfolio.
Sure. And I know that you really enjoy it and get a lot of self
I do.
satisfaction out of it. You've done
hmm
some work for me. So maybe just tell folks a little bit more about that in case they need a project done and they want to reach out to you.
Sure, sure. So what I do there is people will if you reach out and say, "I've got this thing. I've got this sign at the family cabin, or I got this table everybody used to use, and it means something to me. So even though it's destroyed or not in great shape, can we bring it back to life? Not that you can't go buy a new one at IKEA, but you want that one, right? Well, people like me, we bring those things back to life. So if people need some sort of nice furniture restoration or something they want restored, I do that. Or if people are looking around their house saying, I could use a really cool bench or a really neat live edge table or a really cool mantle, but they don't want to just go to the store and get it. They want somebody to hand make it, a craftsman. That's the other stuff I do. So people mostly come to me for like, I need a new mantle. It's so funny this spring people are like, "Do you do window boxes?" I'm like, "Never done them, but I know how." So now I'm doing like 30. And I just it's so funny, Rick, because I just love it. I mean, to me, it's not work. It's woodworking is like fishing, is like golf, is just one of those things that I enjoy.
All right.
And
Well, when we finish up today, as you were talking, I just
mhm.
came up with about three or four more things up at the lake for you to do on. So when we're done, don't go
Yeah,
away. Let's talk a little bit more about that. And then
sure.
I also have to say, the Minnesota Daily, I chuckled a little bit when you said that. So the first kind of professional job I got, I answered an ad in the Minnesota Daily to work with two stockbrokers downtown Minneapolis. And anyway, so the Minnesota Daily's got a warm place in my heart, as I'm sure it does for you and many
Totally.
other.
Yep. Yeah, it really does. That university is an amazing asset to our state. The things inside of it, the daily, the sports programs, the communities, it's awesome.
All right, so you've touched on a couple of different things here. Interesting to learn a little bit more about how you evolved into this independent, multiple revenue stream worker. So, talk a little bit about just your process.
Sure. How I did it. So the evolution of becoming, a multiple stream independent worker now, it really started when I sold my ad agency in 2017 to my partners, Jim Cousins and Greg Dutton, two great guys. I was ready at that time to be free from that normal. I'm doing air quotes. I shouldn't do that. That normal way of work. Well, just a big bunch of years doing things this normal traditional way, and I felt like a square peg in a round hole. I kind of found that professional life in America, um, it was just too focused on hours, on butts and seats, on step and repeat processes. almost for the sake of habit more than outcome. And that just, I didn't like it. So I stepped away from that and into this void. I'd love to say, oh, Rick, I built a business plan and it was all perfectly set up. I mean, sometimes your evolution is you're just not doing what you were doing before, and there creates a void, and then it fills with things that were probably on their way already. So that void gave opportunity to what I'm doing now. Is I started to look at my career through a different non-traditional lens, not a general job lens, but a do work I love lens. And the more I pursued that, the more I found successful things that filled that void in the non-traditional job model. So that's how the evolution came about. I would say there was probably some seedlings or hatchlings along the way. I've always been an entrepreneur. Most people who know me know I'm pretty abnormal. I don't do things the normal way. So that was probably some things already in place long before that moment. So
Well, abnormal, I don't know if that's the right word. How about just unique?
you sure? Yeah, yeah. Depends on who you ask, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, talk a little bit about VoyagerU. How did you come up with that idea?
So that's a really great story. So my now business partner, Jason Boyevich, and I, years ago, well, not that many years ago, we were working on a project for a client back when I owned the agency, and he was actually a consultant. And I don't remember the client and I don't remember the project, but I do remember it was just a hot mess. And I remember it so specifically. I remember we were sitting and I remember where we were sitting in our office, and we were trying to figure out, classic business, trying to figure out something for clients. What are the resources? What are the costs? What are the inputs? What resources do we have? What do we have to go get? And we knew like it was just so difficult, and it was nothing but friction. And we knew like we just felt like the client wasn't going to get what they needed, we weren't going to get what we needed, we were just exhausted. And we pulled back from the table and we thought, well, there just has to be a better way to do this. And that just sort of sparked Jason and I talking and thinking about how might the supply and demand for professional services be different than it is now. And we thought there has to be a better way to connect the dots. And we knew that we were just trying to figure that out for the company I owned at the time. We knew every agency in the world was suffering from the same thing. We knew every accounting firm. We knew it's just such a common problem. It wasn't just our problem, it was a problem in the American economy. And so that was kind of where Voyager sort of hatched. Jason and I are kind of capitalists, so we looked at it through a good economic lens. Like, all right, what are the supply and demand things here? And it really was a classic supply and demand puzzle. On the supply side, the client needed marketing solutions. In order to get them, they had to take on 7 people. Three they would never see. 2, weren't perfectly trained for everything they needed, and the other 2 would be leaders that they wouldn't be able to spend that amount of time. So it's just kind of a broken model there. So we thought, well, let's just do some small thing and change the supply and demand relationship in professional services. No small task. But that's how it hatched, is that thought and that opportunity. It all happened when I was feeling entrepreneurial wanderlust again. So I was ready to go do something new at the same time when the timing kind of came in for that. So that's how VoyagerU hatched 3 years
Okay.
ago,
And
almost 4
then
years
just
ago.
to tie my world into yours. And I don't even remember, we met many, many years ago, followed you
Hmm.
through the agency world. And then obviously the last couple of years, we've worked together on many fronts, whether it's
Hmm.
VoyagerU or Brimacombe and Associates, Brimacombe Capital, but a number of different things over the last couple of years. But actually, I don't know if you know this, but Jason helped me do the original Brimacombe and Associates branding work, and the tagline "Grow or Die" was something that I said in one of my conversations to Jason, and he grabbed it. And so my branding for Brimacombe and Associates, Jason did for me like 15, 16 years ago.
Isn't that something? It's just, and he was probably working at his agency then, but it's just such a
Yeah,
things come around, don't they? Such a small world,
yeah, very small
and
world.
there's a reason for that. We're active in our communities.
Yep. So let's maybe start with some definitional things, and then we'll
Sure.
dive in a little deeper. Talk a little bit about the difference between gig, fractional, independent, consulting, freelance. There's a lot of terms that get thrown
Yeah,
about. Some of it interchangeable, some of it maybe not. So maybe help us with some of those definitions.
you bet, you bet. And I get asked this question a lot. And so what I've come to realize, and I think it's easiest to explain, is they have a lot more in common than they have as differences. So I'll speak to the commonalities there. They're all 1099 work. They're not a W-2 full-time job. So that's a commonality. They're all tailor-made for remote work. That's kind of remote work, relatively new at scale, but they all fit that model. So that's in common. They're all based on valuing your particular skill set and ability to solve problems for a client that a client can't problem solve himself. So that's the same whether it's fractional, gig, freelance or whatever. A couple other things: none come with healthcare, none come with a 401k, so that's common. Um, they all require you to participate in active biz dev, active pipeline work. And one of the things that makes them very similar to each other is they're all very freeing. There's no politics, no waste of time, no wasted meetings that leaves time for health and side hustles and other dimensions of life. So those are the commonalities. So the differences are really marginal. Fractional and gig, by definition, tend to be more long term, 3, 6, 9 months, a year, 2 years, because you're sitting in a seat that needs to be occupied in order for that business to grow. That's how that one is it's healthy to look at it that way. Consulting and freelance tends to be more project based. Someone's like, I need a consultant to come here and figure out this big 6-month supply chain issue or finance issue, but at the end of that we kind of can see a finish. um, that that is consulting. Same thing for freelance. There's typically a project. The continuity comes from fractional, where you're occupying a role that isn't a project. You have to have somebody in charge of finance in a business. You have to have somebody in charge of sales and marketing. You have to have somebody in ops. And those other dimensions are IT. So that's fractional. Interesting point about that is one can kind of beget the other. You can come in on a freelance project and solve something and find out you now have a permanent role as a fractional in there. So they sort of cross pollinate in a lot of ways. So it's interesting now how much it's being thrown around, isn't it? The terms, as the growth of the remote work and the sharing economy. You did ask the question about what does independent mean? Independent, I think, is just the holder of all of them. They're all independent work.
Okay. A
Mhm.
reminder to everybody to hit the subscribe button, as well as you can submit your questions in the comments field if you're listening today in the YouTube channel. All right. So talk a little bit about the dynamics as to why this model of work is growing. Obviously, all the trends are pointed up and to the right. I've built my world around this over the last 15, 16 years. You're doing this, many others. So talk a little bit as to why this model of work is growing.
Sure. Like anything that grows in the American economy, it typically relates to some simple basic economics of there's some supply and there's some demand issues at play that are causing some growth. So on the demand side, the number one reason this independent model is growing is classic American way. It's lower cost. It's a lower cost solution. America loves its low cost solutions, always has. When a company hires an independent professional, they're immediately stripped and gets into that habit of doing it and employing fractionals and that kind of thing. They're immediately stripping away 70% of their costs. They're not paying for healthcare. They're not on the hook for 401k. They're not paying for real estate for people to be in. They're not spending dollars on training people, because when you hire a fractional or a freelancer, they're coming with some talents you need. So you're already hiring specialists. You're not paying for their computer, cell phone, internet. It's just cheaper than a full-time employee. So simple, like, oh, the math works out really, really well. That's giving rise. The other part of that on the demand side is the quality is sky high. I know I've often quoted Scott Galloway, like, when times are tough, people need gray. They need wisdom. They need intelligence, and times are tough. And so we are at a moment in our economy where the wise, the people who have learned and burned and got the lessons, they bring to all of that. And that means efficiency and knowledge and problem solving. Um, that's what you build sort of recovery on. You don't really build recovery on churn and burn young people until they flame out. That's when you're already in a process that works out pretty well. So, um, some you bring in people, why are sales down? Why is cash flow a mess? Why can't we get into a new territory? You need powerful brains for that. You need some gray in the beard to solve those things. So that's why on the demand side, it's growing so well. On the supply side, I would say, we've been doing this now for almost 4 years, and we bunch, 170 members. We got a lot of people who are involved in this. We get to see the recurring themes, and it's interesting. I would have answered it differently a year ago, but the number one reason it's growing on the people side is freedom. It's so wonderful to see. Like, you simply cannot underestimate the power of a free life. And you'd like to say, well, it's money or something else. It is freedom. It doesn't mean free and easy. I want to be very clear about that. There's a lot of accountability you have to sort of take on in this model. Um, that's where our training comes in. That's where the community comes in. You have to work to do it, but it's doable. And the freedom that comes with it, freedom from politics, freedom from waste of time, freedom from traffic. It is such a keeper of why people stay here. 85% of the people who do this say they're never going back. So that has a lot to do with it. The numbers two is a little bit of a surprise, I think, on the supply side. Why it's growing is the risk reduction. So many people lost their job, their only source of income in the last few years. And that obviously is very scary. And when you go back out and like, well, now I've got three sources of income. They represent the same amount of income or close enough that I had before. But if one goes down, I'm okay. I can build it back up. So the risk reduction is a number two reason people tend to go in here. So yeah, that's those.
So we got a question from the audience, John. So David wanted to know what's the impact of the gig economy on rural America. So you talked a little bit about why this model of work is growing. It's driven by cost. People like the
Mhm.
freedom. Maybe they lost their job. It's out of necessity. But how does this play across rural America?
Yeah, that's a great question and a really, really interesting topic. So if you looked last year at where housing sales moved, the year before it was like, let's use the Twin Cities market as an example. I think the year prior, the housing activity was like first ring suburbs. Richfield, I think, had its biggest growth. Now, I think it's like Wyoming and Stacy getting into the rural area. So what's happening in the rural world is they're absorbing some more population that they normally wouldn't absorb because people needed to stay closer to their place of work. That comes out of the way, and all of a sudden, outerlying communities, they start to receive some population. Is that good? Is that bad? It's a pretty recent dynamic, so obviously, it's bringing cash into those economies. So that's awesome. It's also bringing change to those economies. I mean, you're not going to find a restaurant owner in Stacy, Minnesota, who's going to complain about more customers. So, there's dynamics that come with change as ever. The other thing I think is interesting is when you kind of get into, and I kind of think I'm taking a Midwest centric look here, but the vacation communities, the amount of people who have vacation homes or cabins, they're spending a lot more time up there because they can. So that's not necessarily farmland, but it's a lot of lakeland and that sort of thing. So again, those communities are changing. I don't think you can buy a used boat in Minnesota anymore. They've all been swooped up, So those are some of the dynamics. Is it good? Is it bad? It's early, right? I think generally it's good. I mean, the more cash that comes into any community is a good thing, especially now. So I know there's other dynamics, one thing I would say, I got a lot of friends who are farmers, and the ag world is very close to my heart, is the more the world gets remote, the more tech and access they have, the better off they are, even as like distant, I'm running a farm. So there's some good to the ability for farmers and ranchers to operate in a remote way on a strong remote base. So better bandwidth is happening. those things like that. So hopefully I answered your question. It's a great question, and there's a lot more dimensions to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we see it here today with you working up at your family lake place, with
That's
me
right.
spending time up at our family lake place.
Hmm.
So it allows you to live that more free life that you want to do. You're out,
Hmm.
so you're getting any fishing in this week?
I did get on the ice a little bit. It's still 2 feet thick up here. Myself and my uncle and a friend of his, we went out. I came up here to help my uncle on a lot of things, and we got a little ice fishing in and caught a bunch of panfish. So it's kind of nice. And then it's funny you say that because I was sitting on a bucket out on the ice on a beautiful day, and I was answering emails for a little bit while the fish weren't biting. It all
That
works.
sounds perfect.
Yeah,
So
it was nice.
what is holding people back from doing this? If maybe there's a main reason, maybe there's a number of different reasons, but what's the main fear or fears that people have about living this independent lifestyle and chasing after this model of work?
Sure, sure. I used to think it was a fear of sales. That was like our first year or two in this. We thought, well, that's obviously the number one issue, and everybody's afraid of sales, so they don't even want to touch it. But over time, as we learn more and more about our people, our members who do this, and others who come in, it's that old imposter syndrome. That's what's at the core of it. It's not the technicality of doing sales. It is the doubt that they can succeed. And again, that's what VoyagerU is for. When you learn the business of independence, when you use the tools of independence, when you connect with that community, that doubt fades because you're building up your arsenal of intelligence about it. But when you're just starting on the outside in, the fear that I can succeed is probably the number one. Um, Once you get into it, though, once you're doing it and practicing the business of independence with discipline, it subsides pretty well because, like any new thing, you're getting good at it. And so, what fills the void of where that fear is, I kind of have my pipeline down. Boy, I've really articulated my value proposition. I did really good with this last client. That imposter syndrome goes away over time and with discipline. But it is the first thing that keeps people out, which is too bad.
So if that imposter syndrome can go down over time and with discipline, what about, are there any kind of, I don't know, hacks or whatever you might want to call it? Is there anything that somebody can do specifically to work on that? You want to get stronger, healthier, you go to the
Hmm.
gym, work on your diet, you want to catch more fish, you just spend more time out on the lake.
Hmm.
Anything specific that folks can do to work on this insecurity and imposter syndrome?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. There's two things. Part one, this will really take care of it and help you with it is take the time and energy to spend the time on what your business is going to be, who you are. The more you get good at, like, I'm gonna be an independent consultant. I'm gonna do this. This is what you do. This self inventory stuff, and all of a sudden you realize it's not so scary because I've spent the time and energy to really build up what the business is going to be. That's awesome because you go from this, ambiguous, I think I can do it. I'm going to see if I can get some clients. That's no way to do it. So one is do the work of building what your business is going to be and be disciplined about it. Two, there's a process you can follow. Our model and our training and our community, it's very disciplined. And for people who like to check things off a list, we've by design built things in there. So we've created a very simple pipeline tool. We call that Bootstrapper, and we talked about this last week. And that's where everything is a process and a step and a procedure. And by doing that, you all of a sudden realize this isn't so scary. I can do this. Hell, this actually looks pretty easy because I got a little gray in my beard and I've done this before. I just haven't done it this way. And so that do the processes, do the work of independence, and do that self discovery. Those two things, and that's like the first 30 days, right? This first 30 days, you start doing that sort of thing, you're on your way. You're on your way. You're sort of realizing, hey, I am pretty good. I just have nobody's told me that in the last year. So it's those two things go a long way.
And then what about just getting into the business? How do people overcome their the perception of these barriers to entry, what might they do just to get going?
Just to, how do you jump in, right?
Huh.
Well, again, I kind of go back to discipline. Being independent, it's not like you can say, I'm a consultant now, come on in. It just doesn't work that way. And it didn't work that way when you had a full-time job either. The opportunity just doesn't show up at the door just because you exist. And so the ways to sort of jump in are, well, there's three things. You got to learn new stuff. There's a way to be an independent professional where you got to learn new stuff. Hopefully the things we have in Voyager do that. We got 100 lessons. Hopefully they tamp down any question or any obstacle there. You got to meet new people. There's a whole new world, and that's going to happen anyway because we're not driving into buildings anymore full of people that we work with. So you got to find a way to network and meet and connect and engage with new people. Those two things are jump in, get your feet in there, accept that as sort of part of this part of the independent reality, and you're off and running.
And then would you say, I mean, you talked a little bit about the planning, talked a little bit here about needing to learn new things and engage and interact with new people.
Mhm.
Is it a little bit like the saying about planting a tree? Best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago or today. As far as jumping in, do you recommend that people just jump in, or do you recommend, hey, if you just jump in, you may not have the outcome you want, and so maybe you need to be a little bit more thoughtful in how you get going. But what would your advice be to somebody on that front?
Yeah, learn. Jumping in, you jump in shallow water, and if you don't find out how deep it is, you could break your neck. You do have to learn, and that is a great inoculation for fear, but also preparedness for what this world is going to give you, the independent world. So there is this sort of, I think you're onto something. There is this entrepreneurial spirit. And my old business partner, Jim Cousins, he used to say, John F. Kennedy had this great line. Sometimes you got to throw your hat over the fence. You don't know what it's like on the other side, but you got to go get it. It's pretty motivational, but you might get killed by the dog when you jump over that fence. So, you do got to learn the new stuff, and it's probably not best to jump in and hope everything's going to sort of come in the wake, as opposed to learn what you're jumping into. Then you can jump in with as much aggression as you want, but learn. Yep.
All
And you
right.
kind of have to right now, right? Like, listen, we are well into a remote economy. We are well into hiring fractionals and gigs. We are we're well into laying off tons of people. Things have changed, man. You got to learn what the world is bringing you to, in the next 20 years.
So what about, let's say they've gone through the learning process, met
Mhm.
the right people, sketched out their business, were thoughtful, threw their hat over the fence, went over the fence, and they're up
Yeah.
and running. Okay, what's the next major issue that folks face once they're in the game?
Once they're in the game, the next major issue people face is keeping a healthy pipeline. And there's this thing about the independent economy is, boy, it's an industry that's full of feast and famine. And that's not true at all. But that's what everybody says it is. Once you're in and you've got a few customers and you're serving customers, it is up to you to do the discipline of keeping your pipeline active. And there's this weak excuse of, well, I don't have time because I'm so busy with customer work. That's not on your customers, that's not on the industry, that's on you. And so it's the discipline of keeping that pipeline healthy is the number one thing people face. Now, again, that's something you can deal with. There's ways to make that not an issue. But it always bothered me, Rick, when people would say, well, that's just natural with the industry. You're always going to have feast and famine. That's why you shouldn't go in. Well, what changed when you lost customers? Did the whole economy go down? Did the industry you're in collapse? And if the answer is no to those two, it's like, well, nothing changed about it. You've changed. And so, in that regard, be master of your own destiny there and say, yeah, accept that if I don't do certain things, it will be feast and famine, but I'm going to do things to keep that from happening to me.
Okay. So, reminder again, everybody, if you are out there on YouTube, submit your questions and John and I will do our best to get to it. You used the phrase there just a moment ago, John, feast or famine.
Mhm.
Um, got a question from Ask. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that properly. What advice would you give a new college graduate interested in the freedom of independent work, but they lack the work experience?
Yeah, that is a growing dimension of the independent world. And you're right, you can't go out there and leverage. I've been doing this for 30 years or 20 years, so I know this stuff cold. If you're a recent college grad, as I tell 'em, I have two that are that, you're only beginning your learning, which is really, really true. It's like, oh, I went to college and I learned a bunch of stuff. The learning journey kind of just begins here. You can get in here and you can be independent, but you're going to have to be you're not going to be able to leverage a lot of experience. So a couple of things you're going to have to accept is you're going to have to accept some roles and some, how to put it, not leadership roles, but roles where they can still be fractional and gig and part time, but they're going to be roles you're going to have to learn a ton. That is going to put you in a place where you can, then leverage that into wisdom you've gained. But I didn't have it. Nobody comes out of college with a bunch of experience. And if you do, it's like, oh yeah, it's great that you've been working, but who's going to ask? I would never ask a 23-year-old me, hey, can you solve the biggest, gnarliest problems in our sales funnel? I'd be like, dude, I just want to get off work at 5 and go have beers. What's this all about? So you got to go learn a bunch of new stuff, and that's going to give you the experience. Watch out for roles that are just not going to challenge you. Step and repeat. You can learn a lot from that, but get in a place where you get some challenge. And I think at your age, the more you get in a role where you interact with others, if you're stuck in a corner and you're not really interacting with a lot of folks, your learning is going to suffer. And so the more you get into an orbit with other people, the more you learn. That's just the way it is. So maybe a little bit of a roundabout question, but an honest one.
Sounds like
Or answer, not question. That's good.
well, it sounds like a pretty good answer from somebody who's a father of three.
I am. Yeah. You just have to, it's tough being young. You can't leverage wisdom. But here, I will tell you this is there's a line that I just hate. Fake it until you make it. Nothing works better in the economy than authenticity. If you're going to go talk to a customer at our level, in the gray beard level or having a season, you absolutely don't have to fake anything. You're awesome because you got a lot of experience. If you're young, it's like, well, yeah, you can't leverage that. Don't fake that you're something else. That doesn't feel good to anybody. Leverage what you are. You can grind, you can work hard, you can learn exponentially. Those are to your advantage. I think the other part, Rick, is I think we all just have to get used to this idea that a lot of jobs are just going to be untraditional from here on out. I think the idea of like whether I'm 25 or 23 or 55, the full time thing, there's already 55 million people doing this in the US. There's big, dramatic social, economic, global reasons why this model works. We're still kind of figuring out, but it's here. So learn the dynamics of the independent business.
So, talk a little bit about the money side. So,
hmm
talked about overcoming fears, talked about keeping the pipeline full and managing ups and downs of the
hmm
journey. But talk a little bit about the money side of things.
Sure. So I think a good thing to think about is the money side is plan on each customer representing about $5,000 of income per month per customer. Across our membership, those would be the averages. It's a good average. Some clients might be $10,000 a month, some might be three, but five is a good say. That's okay. That's good. Um, for yourself, most independents can handle 3 to 6 clients. So now you can do the math and say, all right, well, if it's $5,000, that's either $15,000 or $30,000 a month. There you go. Give or taking a little bit. It's going to change if you're a consultant because that's permanent, fractional. There's some things, but 5K is like if you started today and said 3 clients, $5,000 each, that's the revenue I'm looking at for this year. You'd put yourself in. That's a good plan. There's another dimension of income to think about, and that is your retirement and savings. Where's that going to come from? A lot of people in this world are using their side hustle for that. That's your 401k. If you have an idea for a business that's been tamped down and late and you haven't been able to approach it for like the last 20 years because you're stuck, sun up to sundown and, working on stuff from 9 to midnight for somebody else, now that gets some time and energy and that should become a revenue generator. And it's not wrong to go, oh, okay, well, I might build a company and sell it for 100,000 or $1 million or whatever it's going to be, or even higher. And that's part of my retirement. So that when you think about money, it's like, well, you always want to think about retirement. Where's that big thing going to come from?
Sure.
So
So healthcare and 401k, those are big issues. Any other thoughts on that?
yeah, for sure. They're very big issues. One, the healthcare, if you have a spouse or significant other, get on their plan if you're not already. That works, right? That's just super simple. The open market does have solutions. It's not like there's not healthcare for independents. We're just not used to it. So just factor your cost for that into your fee. Some money going to a retirement fund and some money going into healthcare, you're fine. And you're still going to cost, way cheaper than you would be as a full timer. So that's why we talk about $5,000 and $10,000 a month. Other things with healthcare and benefits, I would say, as you're getting into this, is keep your fingers on the pulse. This economy is growing. Investors are investing, banks are investing. There's fintech spending money. Like there's a lot of oxygen in this independent economy right now. And so you got to kind of keep your eye on it. When it comes to healthcare, Freelancers Union it's not a 501c3. It's a for-profit company. They're out of New York. They're kind of leading a lot of healthcare solutions for independents. Things like that are emerging. I would say they're probably a leader in that space. In financial tech for retirement and those bennies that you would normally get from a business, I like Catch. Catch has a really simple solution to sweep money into an account and come get it later when you want to retire. Keep your finger on that pulse because a lot of stuff is happening there. Maybe not as fast. The other thing I would say is when you're thinking about that, those bennies, don't forget to reach out to your, the policymakers, the lawmakers. At 55 million people, it's on people's radar now. So in Minnesota, yeah, reach out to Amy Klobuchar and say, what are we going to do for all these independent people? We need healthcare solutions. We need some retirement stuff. We need this at the policy level. Our economy does great when everybody's making a bunch of money and spending a bunch of money. It's what everybody wants the same thing, but policy has to sort of accommodate for this. It was a good year for that, by the way. This when Washington listened, they put independent contractors on the unemployment benefit and the stimulus benefit just like everybody else. So if you were, that historically you might have been left out. Now we're a factor. So the policy level matters too.
All right, reminder to everybody, hit the subscribe and like button. You also can submit a question. We got a couple more questions. We got a little bit more time yet today. So again, feel free to chime in and join our conversation. Talk a little bit, John, about the social impact of this working model. You have an individual worker's life and how that's changed, and then I suppose the impact on their family. But talk a little bit about the broader social impact.
Yeah. So I'll start with community, on the social impact. If you can imagine, people are spending more time on doing quality of work and less on quantity of, and again, that's traffic and that's useless meetings and all that. More time does free up. And what more time means is, from a social standpoint, parents have more times with their communities and families, more time to coach, more time to volunteer, more time to spend time and energy on things that are important for their community. So that's awesome, right? That's an impact that those who are doing this are already seeing. So that's a community impact. I like to think of social impact as innovation. All these wonderful ideas and all of this energy that sort of come out from underneath, maybe where it wasn't fully utilized in the full-time role. It's out in the open now. Like, you have dogs, right? You ever go to the dog? You have a dog?
I do not.
Oh, well, people who have dogs.
I had 4 children instead of pets. So I'm long on children, short on pets.
Okay, all right. Well, this will probably make sense to you. So all this innovation, right? Like, if you ever gone to the dog park and you see 10 dogs let off a leash at once, And it's just like all of a sudden this surge of energy and happiness and productivity. All of these ideas and innovation and effort that have sort of been latent now have agency to get out in the world. That's social impact. There's new ideas and new businesses and new that's amazing for America. So that I think is a big social impact that we're seeing, and will continue to see. Um, so innovation has social impact. Time and quality in the community has social impact related to this. Um, you know, economic. Can I talk about the economics of it? I mean, by rebalancing the supply and demand of labor or work, um, we do it right. We put more cash in the economy overall. Businesses have more cash because they're not paying for everything that they were paying before. So now they can go open new territories and do innovative things. Workers have more cash because, what I hear all the time, Rick, is people say, John, the reason I left is, I lost 15% of my salary over the last 2 years. Less cash, I have less to spend. The jobs I'm looking for are paying only 75% of what I'm currently making. That just means less cash. That's not good for anybody. More cash in the economy is good for everybody, supply and demand side. So I think that's going to have, or has, and will continue to have a lot of impact on our society from an economic standpoint.
Hey, you've done a lot of interesting things in the career, owning your own agency, and then now having these multiple gigs and starting companies and the side hustle. You got all these things. Do you look backward and say to yourself, hey, was there some kind of lesson that you learned along the way that you wish you would have learned sooner?
There is. There is. It's on my calendar and it shows up in front of me every day at 7 o'clock in the morning when I'm at my laptop having my coffee. It's a little reminder. And it's three lessons in one. So it's this little thing that says breathe, challenge the status quo, and take time to listen. And I wish earlier in my career I would slow down and take time to breathe. I wish I listened to the little notes in my head that says now is the time to challenge the status quo. Do it now. And take time to listen. I mean, listening is it's how you learn. It's such a wonderful thing. As a talker and an Irishman and the 4 out of 5 boys in a noisy family, I have learned to always be filling the air with words, and that's not a good thing. It's just a terrible habit that I have, and I've really tried to really work on listening, the art of listening and being a good listener. It's going to be a constant battle for me. I wish I would have done that more when I was younger, but I do it now. So breathe, challenge the status quo, and take time to listen.
All right, so you hit on the jumping off, taking a little tangent here.
Hmm.
You mentioned being an Irishman.
Yeah.
So it is March. We got St. Patrick's Day, actually, a week from today. We
Yeah.
had John Cosgrove on a couple days ago talking about things. And any St. Patrick's Day traditions or activities that you like, or any nuggets of information you'd like to share. So if the topic is St. Patrick's Day, where would you, John the Irishman, like to take that?
I will take that to a family delicacy. It's called bockwurst, and as
Okay.
we only have it during Easter, and particularly on St. Patty's Day. It's a breakfast sausage. It's rare to get. You can go get it up at Hockenmueller's. And I'm saying those words now, and I know there are listeners saying, "Bockwurst, my family used to have that." It's really rare. It's awesome, and it's. I always think of bockwurst when I think about St. Patty's Day. So that's where I wanted to take it. There's a lot of other ways I could. Don't drink and drive, but we all know that already.
We all know that already.
Hmm.
Outside of a pandemic year, actually, this
Hmm.
would be the second St. Patrick's Day, if not ruined, at least dampened by the
Hmm.
pandemic. What would John Arms usually do on a more normal St. Patrick's Day?
Uh, as a kid growing up, we would always do Meals on Wheels because we knew a lot of people couldn't get out, and so as a family, we'd go feed a bunch of people. And Did that for many years growing up. And then on St. Patty's Day or a Friday during Lent, we did a lot of fish fries for people. Just feeding people who can't get out. Because it's, it's St. Patty's Day. It's like, let's get social and go meet people. Sometimes you think like, well, there's a lot of people who can't. So I always like to reach back to those who can't and give them some time and all that. So that would be what I would do. Those are the kind of things we would do on a normal year. Of course, I do have to go get a shamrock shake and a fish sandwich. That's without question has to happen on a St. Patty's Day.
All right. And I don't know if you planned it, and they're kind of muted greens, but your t-shirt and your long sleeve shirt both are in the green family today.
Yeah, that's in honor of this. Actually, is a Minnesota Wild shirt.
Okay.
I think they play again tonight. It's been kind of fun to watch them. So I'm supporting the home team, the home hockey team.
Okay. What about I saw at the grocery store, the Lucky Charms that for St. Patrick's Day, they actually turn the milk green. Do you have a box of that on the shelf?
I don't. I didn't know they did that. So it turns them just like the Chicago River. It turns the milk green, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So
That's genius.
right now, I actually bought a box a week ago, brought it home to give it to the boys.
Yeah,
So anyway,
that's awesome. Talk about a delicacy. Who doesn't love a good cereal milk after a sugary cereal? And then how could you improve it? Well, apparently the only way is make it green.
or add bockwurst for your breakfast sausage.
I'm telling you, Rick, bockwurst is a game changer. It is my family, which is a huge Irish family. We have arguments over the best way to have it. It's a thing. It's a thing.
All right. Well, I will try it. All right. All seriousness, looking back over our conversation today, we covered a lot of ground. Any kind of last thoughts or things that you would like the audience to take with them when they finish up the session today?
You bet. You bet. I would say don't let yourself get left out of this. This business of independence, this gig work, this remote thing, where all of this is going matters a ton. Do not let yourself get left out of motion in the US marketplace that is well on its way. Like I said, banks are investing in it. Healthcare is investing in it. 55 million people are doing it. There is motion in place. You do not want to be the last person in line. So my advice is learn, at a minimum, learn what is, if you are to have a role or a future as an independent professional, go out there and learn. That's what Voyager is for, but it doesn't have to just be through us. Go to Voyager and learn, but learn what's here. Learn how you can get in it. Don't get left out. There's no reason to. It's well on its way. Things change, and you don't want to be left out. I fear that people are going to go, it's not going to happen to me. I'm not going to get laid off, or my job is always going to be wonderful. It's going to pay me enough. And I fear by the time they choose to learn about it, it's not going to be too late, but you don't want to be behind. So things change. Learn about this. The BlackBerry is no longer our smartphone. We don't go to Blockbuster. The BlackBerry is no longer a smartphone, and we don't go to Blockbuster to watch our weekend videos anymore. Things change. Don't get left out of this.
So how can somebody learn more about VoyagerU, and how can somebody get a hold of you?
Sure. You can learn more about VoyagerU at VoyagerU.com. Voyageuru as in university.com. You go there and it's like, here's all the information. Here's what's happening in this world. Join the community. You're going to get, people who do this to talk to, people to support you, people you can support. You're going to learn the dynamics of business of independence here. That's how you can learn about VoyagerU. We've got great dimensions here. We've got a very active community. We've got an online living, breathing, pulsing entity. We've got coursework. So this is a great place to you go in there, that's your entry door. The other thing where people can reach me, you can just email me, john.arms@voyageru.com. You can reach me there if you have questions. I always love to take a half hour. I got this little Calendly thing. It's like, where would you like to go? What's frustrating in your career today? How can we fix that? So that's where people can learn about VoyagerU. And what this world is about.
All right. And then you didn't know I was going to ask this question, and it's totally self serving, but I ask it anyway. As we wrap up here, a little plug for me in
Mhm.
that you and I have been working together on VoyagerU. If there was one thing that you would say that would describe your work with me and the efforts and progress we've made over the last year, what would that be?
Super simple. I think I was alluding it to it earlier without naming names. I said the word gray in the beard. In your business world, even if you're an independent professional, but if you have a small or startup business, you have to have smart people around you. You'll never get there alone. You'll never get there through grind alone. You'll never you have to have people who have a little gray in their beard. Rick has, I don't mean to call you old because you're not, but you have experience and you have to have that. And so our relationship has been great because you tell me all sorts of stuff that I don't know. I don't see it. And so having, the ability to say, hey, Rick, once every 2 weeks, what's going on here? What do you see? How do you see this? I mean, you can look at it through the lens of you're saving tens of thousands of dollars a month, or you can look at it through the lens of you're defining your opportunities that you didn't see before. Um, I would never get that from somebody who doesn't have the experience you have. So I would say that if you're a business who needs the benefit of a different lens that's got been there, done that, that defines our relationship.
All right. Well, since that was such a good plug, your next fish sandwich and shamrock shake is on me.
Ah,
Uh,
yes.
and again, John.arms at VoyagerU.com. John, thank you very much. Again,
Thank
this
you.
was part two.
Mhm.
Bootstrapping sales is different part two. You can catch both part one and part two on the YouTube channel Club E or clube.com. John, thank you very much for joining us. I trust that you'll come back again, especially if I get you that fish sandwich and the shamrock shake.
I'm in, baby. I'm in. I'm in. Thank you for having me. Thank you, people, for watching. Reach out to Rick or I and learn more about this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, John.
All right.